Yat Shaktayaha, whose multifarious potencies, Vadatam, speaking different philosophies, Vadinam, of the speakers, Vai, indeed, Vivada, of argument, Sangvada, and agreement, Bhuvaha, the causes, Bhavanti, are, Kurvanti, create, Cha, and, Esham, of them, the theorists, Muhuhu, continuously, Atma, Moham, bewilderment regarding the existence of the soul, Tasmai, unto him, Namaha, my respectful obeisances, Ananta, unlimited, Gunaya, possessing transcendental attributes, Bhumne, the all-pervading Godhead. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the all-pervading Supreme Personality of Godhead, who possesses unlimited transcendental qualities, acting from within the cause of the hearts of all philosophers, who propagate various views. He causes them to forget their own souls, while sometimes agreeing and sometimes disagreeing among themselves. Thus he creates within this material world a situation in which they are unable to come to a conclusion. I offer my obeisances unto him. Purport. Since time immemorial, or since the creation of the cosmic manifestation, the conditioned souls have formed various parties of philosophical speculation. But this is not true of the devotees. Non-devotees have different ideas of creation, maintenance, and annihilation, and therefore they are called Vadis and Prativadis, proponents and counter-proponents. It is understood from the statement of Mahabharata that there are many munis, or speculators, Tarko Pratishta, Shruteyo Vibhinna, Nasa Vrishya Yasya Matang Nabhinnam. All speculators must disagree with other speculators. Otherwise, why should there be so many opposing parties concerned with ascertaining the supreme cause? Philosophy means finding the ultimate cause. As Vedanta Sutra very reasonably says, Atato Brahma Jignasa. Human life is meant for understanding the ultimate cause. Devotees accept that the ultimate cause is Krishna, because this conclusion is supported by all Vedic literature and also by Krishna himself, who says, Aham Saravasya Prabhavaha, I am the source of everything. Devotees have no problem understanding the ultimate cause of everything, but non-devotees must face many opposing elements, because everyone wants to be a prominent philosopher. Everyone who wants to be a prominent philosopher invents his own way. In India, there are many parties of philosophers, such as the Dvaitavadis, Advaitavadis, Vaisheshikas, Mimamsakas, Mayavadis, and Swabhavavadis, and each of them opposes the others. Similarly, in the Western countries, there are also many philosophers with different views of creation, life, maintenance, and annihilation. Thus, it is undoubtedly a fact that there are countless philosophers throughout the world, each of them contradicting the others. Now, one might ask why there are so many philosophers if the ultimate goal of philosophy is one. Undoubtedly, the ultimate cause is one, the Supreme Brahman. As Arjuna told Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, Parang Brahma Param Dhamma Pavitrang Paramang Bhavan Purushang Shashvatam Divyam Adi Devam Ajam Vibhum. You are the Supreme Brahman, the ultimate, the supreme abode and purifier, the absolute truth and the eternal divine person. You are the primal God, transcendental and original, and you are the unborn and all-pervading beauty. Non-devotee speculators, however, do not accept an ultimate cause, sarva karana karanam, because they are ignorant and bewildered concerning the soul and its activities. Even though some of them have a vague idea of the soul, many controversies arise and the philosophical speculators can never reach a conclusion. All of these speculators are envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Tanahang dvishata kruran samsareshu naradhaman kshipyam yajasramashubhan asurishveva yonishu asuring yonim apanna mudha janmane janmane mama prapyaiva kaunteya tato yantyatamang gatim. Those who are envious and mischievous, who are the lowest among men, are cast by me into the ocean of material existence, into various demonic species of life, attaining repeated birth among the species of demonic life. Such persons can never approach me. Gradually they sink down to the most abominable type of existence. Because of their envy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, non-devotees are born in demoniac families life after life. They are great offenders, and because of their offenses, the Supreme Lord keeps them always bewildered. Kurvanti chaishang muhuratma moham. The Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, purposely keeps them in darkness. Atma moham. The great authority Parashara, the father of Vyasadeva, explains the Supreme Personality of Godhead thus: Jnana Shakti Balaishvarya Virya Tejangsya Sheshataha Bhagavat Shabda Vachani Vinaheyar Gunadibihi. The demoniac speculators cannot understand the transcendental qualities, form, pastime, strength, knowledge, and opulence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which are all free from material contamination. Vinahayar Gunadibihi. These speculators are envious of the existence of the Lord, Jagad Ahuranishvaram. Their conclusion is that the entire cosmic manifestation has no controller, but is just working naturally. Thus they are kept in constant darkness, birth after birth, and cannot understand the real cause of all causes. This is the reason why there are so many schools of philosophical speculation. Yat shaktiyo vadatang vadinang vai vivada sangvada bhuvo bhavanti kurvanti chaishang muhuratma moham tasmai namo nantar gunaya bhumne. Om jnana timirandhasya jnananjana shalakaya chakshurin militam yena tasmai Shri Gurave namaha. Nama shreshtham manamapi shachiputram atra swarupam rupam tasya gajamuruparing madhurim goshtavatim radha kundam girivaramaho radhika madhava sham prapto yasya pratita kripaya Shri Gurum Tam Natosmi Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Ataf Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sadhana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahadana Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada writes in this purport, philosophy means finding the ultimate cause. That is the or should be the ultimate goal of philosophy. Of course, there are philosophers who say that there is no ultimate cause. But that's a branch of finding the ultimate cause. Traditionally, or going back to the Greeks, philosophy is in four main categories. epistemology, ontology, ontology, logic, ethics, epistemology. And so when we talk about ethics, it's not about finding the ultimate cause, but then without understanding what the ultimate cause is, then we can't construct a system of ethics. So philosophy means finding the ultimate cause. Srila Prabhupada translates part of this verse. He, Krishna, creates within this material world a situation in which they are unable to come to a conclusion. Yesterday, Devarshi Narad Prabhu was asking about a specific controversy within ISKCON, which rages from time to time. That regarding what has come to be known as the rape purport, in which Srila Prabhupada writes, I'm not exactly sure of the wording, but it's something like this, that women appreciate men who are very expert in rape. So Devarshi Narad Prabhu's question to me was that, well, why, as long as Srila Prabhupada's disciples are present here in this world, why don't they sort it all out and come to a conclusion, the word conclusion, so that we're not left dangling later on. It should all these things should be settled before all the disciples of Srila Prabhupada pass on to wherever we may all be going. Should be going to where Prabhupada is if we actually follow him. Actually, that was done just after the disappearance of the Buddha. All the living disciples, they came together and had a big council and worked it all out, what Buddha actually taught. Nevertheless, there are so many different branches of Buddhism, so that might not be a solution. Your suggestion was, why don't I just put a purport? That it seems an easy thing, not a purport, a footnote explaining that Srila Prabhupada's usage of the word is from Old English, or archaic English. And that would settle it forever. But it's not so simple. There are many implications. And even if the BBT decided to do that, it's actually up to the BBT trustees whether to do that or not. But they might very well get a court case against them for doing it. I'm not advocating making a court case. I'm just talking about the possible implications. I was just thinking about the philosophical implications when I said that, but I just thought that they could also get legal implications. But making resolutions doesn't convince people. A person convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. There's a saying, or by Pope, I think it was, or Samuel Johnson, someone back there. Although that's not exactly true, because if you can't actually be convinced against your will, but the point is you can make a show of being convinced, but you don't really believe it. And just for example, there is a GBC resolution, they sorted it all out. Did we fall from the spiritual world or not? No, we didn't. It's a GBC resolution. You can't really settle things by GBC resolutions, but they have to do something, I suppose. And anyone who doesn't agree with this shouldn't be in ISKCON. More or less, the GBC resolution is like that. But there is a GBC member who regularly preaches that we did fall from the spiritual world, and all his followers believe that, and life is going on. No one's saying anything about it. There are many philosophical issues which may be legislated about, which others may not agree with. For instance, I don't agree with a philosophical or a GBC resolution which more or less said that I'm deviated from Srila Prabhupada. I think many others also don't agree with that. Probably most of you don't, otherwise you wouldn't be sitting here listening to me today. So That is just an example. And then we come to, well, how do we understand, what does it mean to be deviated from Srila Prabhupada? How do we understand whether we fell from the spiritual world or not, saying that Srila Prabhupada said both things? It seems like that. Shastra says one thing, Prabhupada says something else. And in many issues, we say, well, what did Srila Prabhupada do or say? But then we have to think also of the whole gamut of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, not only Guru. Among Christians in America, there's a popular saying, what would Jesus do? So we could say, what would Prabhupada do in this circumstance? And some devotees say that, well, Prabhupada, if he was explained, he'd change it. But we don't know. It's one of those things which will probably go on for as long as Srila Prabhupada's followers are present in this world. There'll be disagreements over that. Anyway, that's just one point, but now I want to talk nonsense. I want to talk nonsense. It sounds strange, doesn't it? Well, according to the GBC, I talk nonsense all the time. Anyway, what is that? You can't say it is, you can't say it is not. You can't say it both is and is not. And you can't say that it neither is or it is not. Okay, that's nonsense, right? I've quoted this several times. Umapati Swami said that he had been reading Buddhism, this is 1965, I guess, around that time. And he'd been reading Buddhism and things like this. And then Prabhupada said, he heard Prabhupada say, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Umapati Swami Wali at the time thought, that's the most intelligent thing I heard in my life. So he stopped trying to understand Buddhism. It's nonsense, isn't it? Is it or is it not nonsense? You can't say it is, you can't say it isn't, you can't say it both is and it isn't, you can't say it neither is or it isn't. Does that make sense? Anyone like to defend it? Either it is or it isn't. It can't be both. Well, that's what they say. But then you can't say that it's... You can't say anything. You might as well just shut up, right? You can't... one thing is, if this was said in Sanskrit, the word it wouldn't come, because we don't even know what it is. But if you said it in Sanskrit, you'd say, asti, nasti, 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 which would mean that, yeah, existence, non-existence. Or isness, non-isness. I'm just trying to translate. The state of being doesn't exist, or is not. The state of... Well, it's difficult to say if you're trying to give an exact... So, asti, nasti. It is not. Nasti means it is not, and asti means it is, and nasti means it is not. So it is not is also not. Well, it doesn't make sense, because if you it's two negatives, right? If you can't, so it's either way. Something either is or it is not. Are we in Zagreb? Well, there can be a border line. Right? Is this under the municipality of Zagreb? This place here, yeah. So either we're in Zagreb or we're not, right? You can't be both. There is a possibility, just like, for instance, well, giving another geographical example. I used to live near a town called Watford, which is just outside London, but it's often considered to be in London. Officially it's not, but the London Underground comes to Watford, the Metropolitan Police, which is the police body for London. So, is it or isn't it? It's considered to be often, when I travel to different parts of England, people say, oh, he's a Londoner. It's my accent, although I'm not actually. So, it can be borderline cases also. This is Buddhist, or one kind of Buddhist nonsense, and I believe that if we said to Buddhists that this is nonsense, they wouldn't be upset. Generally, if we say, you're talking nonsense, that's a kind of chastisement. But they may agree, yes, this is nonsense, but it's purposeful nonsense, or qualified nonsense. Purposeful. How can nonsense have any purpose? Well, they could say that it's pointing to the senselessness of this world. So it has a purpose. It's nonsense, but it's trying to point out that the very concept of trying to make sense doesn't make sense. So you could say that it's the idea that there is no sense, or there is any existence, or even if you think there is existence, even that is wrong. Even if you think there's no existence, that's wrong, because there's a concept of existence, right? You have to have a concept of something to negate it. Just like a labadi duck. You all know what a labadi duck. You don't know what a labadi. There's no such thing as a labadi duck. There's no such thing because there is no such thing. It's just a silly word I made up just now. So you can't really say it doesn't exist, because there's no definition of it. It has no... To know what something is, you have to define what it is. Becomes difficult sometimes. What is a man? What is a male in the modern context? We always used to think that a male was a human, or a human male is born as a child from a human mother, which has genitalia which are different from the other, which is female. But now it became difficult because it became confusing with the idea that is it a boy or a girl? Let the child decide for himself later, when he's old enough, when he or she is old enough. But yeah, there must be some quality by which things are defined to exist. That's why Buddhism is it's Mayavad on amphetamines. It's souped up, or super Mayavad, because Mayavad says nirgun, has no quality, but that gives the idea that something has some guna, has some quality, but or has some visheshta, has some quality, specific quality. But Buddhism is shunyavad. There's no actual existence. You have trouble sitting like this? Yeah, well, it looks like you're gonna... You can sit there better. Prabhupada didn't like that, actually. Yeah, all right. Well, just letting you know that Prabhupada would tell devotees, sit properly. You can sit on the chair. So, yeah. So we can say that although this saying, you can't say it is, etc., is nonsense, it's not pure unmitigated nonsense. Or if you take the conclusion that you don't agree with the conclusion, then you may say it's nonsense. Just like if I say, I am the best person in the whole of the world. And you might think that, and someone will say, you're nonsense. You disagree. So you may disagree with that and call it nonsense, but it's not pure unmitigated nonsense. There are different types of nonsense. How can that be? If there's no sense in it, then there's no sense. Either it's sensible or it's not. Either Well, now we come to word jugglery, if you like. That a word can have different senses, different meanings. Walk this way. What does that mean? Can you say it in another way? Walk this way. Walk in a particular direction. It could also mean walking in a particular manner, right? Because the word way has different meanings. So it could also mean walk with your back straight. Someone holds their back, someone's walking hunched up. So someone might say, walk this way. So the word has different senses, can be misunderstood. And actually, talking about Vedic philosophy, the different philosophies that come out all largely rest on different interpretations of words. Just like the word Brahma, that's a major point of contention. The word Brahma is there in Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic literatures. But what is the nature of that? What does it mean actually? That is a point of contention. So, if we say no sense, nonsense, there are different kinds of nonsense. 2 + 2 = 5. Does that make any sense? That's hard to substantiate that. Because if you bring 2 apples and 2 apples, you get 4 apples, not 5. And throughout the whole of history, and even if we imagine we go to another planet, if you bring 2 objects and add another 2 objects, you get 4 objects, never 5. So it seems to be, that appears to be complete nonsense, isn't it? What do you think? Complete nonsense. 2 + 2 = 5. There is a word in English which is a synonym for nonsense, Jabberwocky. Have you ever heard that? Jabberwocky. It's from Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. I believe it's either Alice in Wonderland. I believe it's from Through. And the first 2 lines I remember, it's a 4-line poem. But I only remember the first 2 lines. Anyway, you get the idea from the first 2 lines. 'Twas brillig and the slithy toes did gyre and gimble in the grabe. I'm not even sure if I pronounced it properly, but anyway, that's what it looks like. What does it mean? It doesn't mean anything, because brillig, there's no such word. 'Twas brillig, it was brillig, and the slithy, there's no such word. Toves did gyre or gyre and gimble or gimble in the grabe. So Lewis Carroll just made up some words and made a nonsense poem. Although Krishna Kshetra Swami told me it's been translated into many languages, including Sanskrit, because he said you can work out what it means from seeing the rest of the text. So that sounds like pure nonsense. The words have no meaning. Or like I made up some word, I can't even remember what it was now, labadadak or something like that. It has no meaning. It's just nonsensical. What about words that have meaning but we don't understand it? Who can say what entropy is? Can you remember from your chemistry class? Entropy, enthalpy. Can you remember? No. You've heard the words, but you can't remember what they mean. Because you forgot it all, like almost everything else we learned at school. So if someone comes here and starts talking about the entropy of a system in a certain state, to us it makes no sense, because we can't understand it. It's not nonsense, but to us it makes no sense. So we may say that, well, you can't say it is, you can't say it isn't, you can't say it both is and isn't, you can't say it neither is or isn't. It is sense, but you just don't understand it. And often people say that, right? Just like that so-and-so is God. That's popular in India especially. There are always a few gods wandering around India at any given time. And someone say, well, he's not God. And the followers will say, well, you can't understand. We can understand. You can't understand. It's nonsense that to call a human being God. What about speaking other languages? It might sound like nonsense. Bolbo bujbe. I just said 2 words in Bengali. Could you understand? No. Maybe Hrishikesh could understand a little bit, but he's absorbed in doing something over there. Bolbo bujbe. Can you understand what it meant? Bolbo, I will speak. Bujbe, will you understand? So it's quite good, huh? I will speak. There's 1 word in Bengali. Bolbo. Bujbe, will you understand? 1 word for 3 words. So if you heard someone speaking, you might think it's nonsense, and if you can't understand the language. And I must admit, I remember in my jingoistic, do you know what that word means? Probably not. It means especially applied to England, we're the best, that kind of mood. My jingoistic childhood, that we naughty boys would laugh when we heard people speaking other languages, thinking that any language except English is nonsense. Although we couldn't understand it. It's something like, I'll give another example from my childhood. My 3rd sister, who was younger than me, used to talk about her friends who no one else could see. She had some imaginary friends. I don't know, maybe they were fairies or whatever. But I'd laugh at her. It's nonsense. She's just imagining. So it may sound like nonsense. It has meaning, but it doesn't. It has meaning, but we don't understand it. It's not that it's nonsense, but we don't understand it. Okay, listen to this sentence very carefully. Menstruating fathers herniating upon the effulgent darkness. Menstruating, you understood that word? Fathers, you understood that word? Herniating, that's probably, it's just like the word hernia. So when an organ or part of the tissue in the body ruptures, it's called a hernia, so it herniates. So menstruating fathers herniating upon the effulgent darkness. So all the words are genuine words, and if you say the word menstruating, you can all understand what it means. But menstruating fathers, not possible. And herniating upon, then we come into language usage, because something can herniate, but it's transitive, intransitive verbs. All that there's no such thing as herniating upon, and you can't translate this because your language is a different structure altogether. Even you know the words, but you can't translate it. I'm getting to that point. Language. Herniating upon, and then we have something like the menstruating fathers, effulgent darkness. Because darkness by definition means there's no effulgence, no light. And father by definition means a male. Okay, let's just go back 50 years in time, and father means male, right? Nowadays, madness. Nonsense. It's nonsense to say that a woman can be a father. Whoops. I just earned myself a 10-year jail sentence. Could be. Could be. Maybe after 10 years, if I'm still alive, they'll arrest me for this, because 10 years ago I said something which is not allowed by the feministic police. Slip of the tongue. So, where are we going? So, what about saying the weather is hot and cold at the same time? Possible? Actually, it is. I'll tell you why. Because when it's not raining here, at this time of year, the sun is quite hot, right? The wind is quite cold at night, but the sun is hot by 8 o'clock in the morning. So at 8 o'clock, if you go out in the sun, you feel heat, and the heat of the sun, and at the same time the cold wind. In a fever, it's hot and cold, flashes. So you feel hot and cold at the same time, paradoxically. How about this saying? A pleasant rogue. A rogue by definition is a bad person, but someone can be a pleasant rogue. Means their behavior is, they deal in such a way that it seems quite nice. And that pleasant rogue may be said as in a kind of friendly way. What's the word? What about this one? I am the Queen of Yugoslavia. Now that's nonsense, isn't it? Because Yugoslavia doesn't exist anymore, so you could say in the past I was the queen, but the Yugoslavia was never a kingdom or queendom. And even if it was, I am not. But I couldn't be the queen because, whoops, here we go in our gender problems again. But at least in Yugoslavia, if a man called himself a queen, he'd probably get beaten up, right? If a man tried to represent himself as a female, when it was Yugoslavia, right? In those days, there were no gay rights. Now, is it total nonsense? 2 + 2 = 5, total nonsense. I'd like to say it's not. How about that? Because there's some sense there. 2, the word makes sense. Plus, the word makes sense. 5 equals, the word makes sense. 5, the word makes sense. But it's when you put them all together in that way, it doesn't make sense. So it's total nonsense would be blah, 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 blah. There's no meaning connected with the sound. But then again, you could say a child may make that sound. So where are we going with all this? And anyway, what's it got to do with Krishna consciousness? Well, I read this verse in which different philosophers say different things, and they don't come to any conclusion. Now, this saying, you can't say that it is, and you can't say that it is not. So that's one conclusion. It is. There is existence. There is reality. And it is not means there's no actual reality. So it is postulating some things some concepts that we can understand, right? It is one thing. There is existence. And it is not, there's no existence of anything. So you can't, but this conundrum, or paradoxical statement, you can't say it is and it is not. So some philosopher may say, well, it both is and is not. Both is and it isn't. Quantum theory. Or you can't say both is and it is not. Is it a wave or is it a particle? Depends on the observer. So you could say both are true, or you could say neither are true. But this saying, you can't say it, then, or see, it had some meaning, right? It stood in for etc. So, they want to say that there's no, even the idea that there's any existence is a mistake. But even if you say it's a mistake, there's no existence of a mistake. So it's really aiming at something which is not possible to think of. But that's the aim, to get there in that system of philosophy. And a lot of the things I've been talking about, they are language games, as Wittgenstein would say. It's said by some to be the greatest philosopher of the 20th century, and others say he's just talking nonsense. Because he was saying that, he said actually there's no need for philosophy, because anyway everything we say, it's just language games, and meaning is ascribed to words, which is similar to, although he wouldn't agree to that, to one major strain of philosophy in the Western world called nominalism, which means there's no, it's a similar thing. There are ideas and there are words, but there's no reality behind it. Which comes to Mayavad, in the idea that the world is there, there's no reality there. But actually in Mayavad they say there is reality. They say, Satyam Brahma Jagan Mithya. Everything in this world is not, it's false. It doesn't actually exist. But the Satyam, the ultimate truth is Satya. But from the Shastra, they'll quote that Brahma is Satya, Anandam, Purnam, it's true, it is bliss, it is complete. There are so many adjectives for Brahma, but then ultimately they say Nirgun. There's no quality. So then, how is it true and blissful? It has no quality. So then actually, if you really want to be a Mayavadi, then you should be a Buddhist. And come to nothing. But nothing means no thing. And if you say no thing, you have to think of a thing to have some, to negate it. So therefore they say, you can't say that it is, you can't say it isn't, you can't say both isn't, it isn't, you can't say neither is and neither isn't. It just really nothing. However, that does seem to be nonsense, right? Because the philosophical response to the, anyone know the philosophical response to all this? Anyone? Any suggestions? Then why do you speak? Well, there's a very practical philosophical reply. It's called kick in the face with boot. And then if you say, the person says, well, no, nothing exists. Okay, well, I'll go kicking you on the face. It doesn't exist. Now your face is all full of blood, and the blood doesn't exist, and the pain doesn't exist. This is actually where Buddha began his philosophy, by seeing that the world is full of distress, and trying to make a solution to that. So, and although Buddha he wanted to preach or to spread this doctrine, let others take it up. But then to spread the doctrine, then other philosophers, people would say, no, that's not true. Your idea is not true. And then they made so many different elaborate schools of philosophy. Actually, if you study philosophy in the Western countries, in the universities, it's really complex and deep and voluminous, but at least in Buddhism alone, what to speak of the Vedic Shaddarshan, the 6 philosophies we call them, although it's not really philosophy in the Western understanding of the term. 6 ideology, it's difficult to translate, I guess, but anyway, 6 different ways of seeing, and then within them there are differences. So just like within Vedanta, there's vast difference between the Advaitavadis and the Dvaitavadis. And Dvaitavadi, which is good with Vishishta Advaitavadi and Shuddha Advaitavadi, and so on and so on and so on. But anyway, Buddhism has brought out so much deep thought and philosophizing and logic and so many things. But actually Buddha didn't bring any of that. He just came to the point, the world is full of suffering, got to get out. More or less he said that, although get out, well, there is no world to get out of, to attain nirvana. So very elaborate philosophy. So how do you know? How do you know what's right? How do you know what's right and what's wrong? I've been talking a lot about words, and words are very powerful, right? If we think, how did Hitler was one of the most powerful people of the 20th century, right? How did he get people to do what they did, follow him and give their lives for his cause? By speaking. He was a fantastic orator. You want motivational speaking? He must be the best motivational speaker in the history of the known, or at least the recorded history. And with symbolism, the Nazi swastika, and raising the right arm like this. He was brilliant. He used to practice in front of a mirror. He used to practice in front of a mirror. Well, there's a photo of that also. Well, I learned something today. No, I didn't know. That's so. Yeah, the words are very powerful. Just I've been talking about gender roles also. So the words he and she, they're very powerful. They have a whole identity that goes with them, and therefore fourth wave feminists are trying to eliminate that. And in Sweden there's some gender neutral word which they use for all people. And in English language nowadays, in academia, you have to be very careful about saying he or she. You have to say he or she, or he and she, where previously you'd say he. Or often nowadays they just say she, or they avoid it altogether by saying they, because it's so... The gender identity it's become such a sensitive issue that people are very afraid to say anything, even if it makes sense. Just like there was maybe just 2 or 3 years ago, one professor was removed from his post for publishing a scientific study which showed that men clearly excel in certain intellectual areas, I believe it was in science, something like this, and women don't. And he got expelled. He got removed from academia for publishing that. So we're getting into the power of words, the power of ideas. I'd said that one of the branches of philosophy is epistemology. How do we understand anything? What is philosophy? Man's search for meaning. What is it all about? And that's why we're here, hopefully. We're searching for meaning, right? Searching for meaning. Oh, otherwise, why are we here? We didn't find meaning in the normal life that we'd been raised in. Go to school, get a job, have a family, go to the coast in the summer, and grow old and die. We didn't find that was meaningful enough, so we came to this. Now, did you go through all this philosophy? I mean, what I just spoke, you could say, is some philosophy, a little touching in a very amateurish way the great ocean of philosophy. Did you go through, or did you consider all these things? No, I doubt it very much. but somehow or other you've come here. What's that called? It's called Krishna's mercy. Others will disagree. How can we be sure? Unless you go through all of this. We should go through all of this, right? All philosophy and then come to a conclusion. The problem is that you'll never come to a conclusion. That's what's stated right here in this verse. You know, it's like a dog chasing his tail. You can never find... If philosophy begins with epistemology, which is intimately linked with language, we can't go anywhere, because we should start as a blank slate, but we can't. We approach anything, everything, with our preconceived notions, which is why they're trying to... The feminist ideology is that children should not be socialized into being boys or girls. Human child is born with male genitalia, but you shouldn't raise him like a boy or give him a sense that he's a boy. Let him decide later. But they find that even with all great efforts to remove all socialization or acculturation by which a child may become boyish, even with removing that, still the tendency is, from the very beginning of life, even in the baby situation, that they're like that. A child born with male genitalia will have certain male psychological attributes. Just as he has different physical attributes, he'll have different psychological attributes also. So we understand from Vedic knowledge that this, we bring with us from previous lives so many conceptions. Shariram yadavapnoti yat chap yut kramatishvaraha grihit vaitani sangyati vayo gandha nivashayat. That we carry different concepts of life, or different concepts or understanding from life to life. That's our understanding. And someone said, well, you can't prove that, and we can't wait to prove it. And that was Buddha's idea also. Don't get into so much philosophy. We're suffering birth and death. Let's get out of it. Not that I'm recommending Buddhism here. But the point is that not by logic and philosophizing. That's the point we hear all the time, right? That we not nayamatma pravachanena labhyo na medya na bahuna shutena. Not simply by studying, philosophizing, hearing, we can't attain the Atma, we can't understand. So, how can we know? And we get lost. Oh, then, what was Umapati Swami? He said, then I heard Prabhupada say Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God, and I thought it was the most intelligent thing I heard in my life. That's the answer. That's the answer to all the philosophical problems, as stated in this verse of Bhagavatam also. Will everyone recognize it? No. Who will recognize it? Kono Bhagyavan Jeev, a very fortunate person. But then you may say, well, how can you be certain? How can you be sure? Well, maybe I'll talk about that tomorrow, because that's another big topic. Nimai Pandit, the greatest logician, just a boy, but he was the greatest logician. He demonstrated by his pastimes that not by logic can one attain to the real goal of life. He was the greatest logician and learned person. He did not surrender to Ishvarapuri and become mad with Krishna praying, because Ishvarapuri gave him a better system of logic. So beyond logic. Anyway, I'm not trying to solve all the philosophical problems in the world here, and they never will be solved, because that's the nature of us being tiny little beings. We're very limited. We have individual outlooks, subjective outlooks. controversies will go on, philosophical and others. So I'm not trying to solve all the problems there, but the problem, actually the problems are solved here in Srimad Bhagavatam. But then others will say not. Then who do we believe? Do we believe Krishna, or do we believe non-devotees, Richard Dawkins? We say if we believe Krishna, well, different people have different ideas about Krishna. So ultimately, we Mahajano Yena Gatasa Panta, we follow Prabhupada, we believe what he says. And then after Prabhupada, so many people will give different ideas about what he said, and more controversies will arise. And that is the nature of this world. So anyway, I'm not trying to solve all those different philosophical problems and linguistic problems. It's not only in Western philosophy. I mean, all this has been there in Vedic and non-Vedic Indian philosophies also. This philosophy of language, there are so many different philosophy of language, philosophy of law, philosophy of science, and so on and so on and so on. But I'm just trying to stimulate some thoughts. Srila Prabhupada said the devotees are the greatest philosophers. And you'll actually see that with Srila Prabhupada discussing about all these different philosophers. Prabhupada hadn't even heard their philosophy, he hadn't philosophies before, but he could immediately detect what in a philosopher's statement was correct or wrong and put it right. So, if we're going to preach as Srila Prabhupada wanted among the more intelligent class of men, although yesterday I read that Srila Prabhupada had referred to them as prostitute hunters. If you actually, and actually in many cases, we find the great intellectuals, their main interest in life is the same as a donkey, which is having sex. That I remember one godbrother, he was in Kalakanta Prabhu, I believe it was. This is 1970s in England. He'd come to sell standing orders for Srila Prabhupada's books in the university. So he was seeking out one famous Indologist, famous in those circles of Oxford University. He found him in the bar, in the pub, as they say in England, with one girl on each side of him. So that was his philosophy. And Satsuru Maharaj wrote about, he went to some meeting with all the Indologists, and they were all drinking and this and that, and making irreverent jokes, and they're not big talk, but their behavior is abominable. So that's one thing, that we can talk big philosophy, but we have to see what is the behavior, what is the effect. It's very, it's essential in Vedic thought, or in that to be a philosopher or to have to be accepted as a man of knowledge, one has to exhibit that in his behavior. A man of knowledge will not be chasing after women. A man of knowledge restrains his senses. Otherwise rejected. This Osho caused so much damn. He's considered a great philosopher by some people, but he was promoting illicit sex in the name of spiritual advancement, animalism. So there are so many things. Just we should think. Prabhupada said devotees are the greatest philosophers because they come to the reason is they come to the actual point. Otherwise we can't. If we just try to sort everything out philosophically by our own intelligence, there's no end. There's no end to it. And we may think, well, let me do that. Wittgenstein thought he'd done it. He said, now I solved all the philosophical problems of the world, and he went and taught in a primary school in Norway. I suppose another who thought like that, although he didn't present himself so much as a philosopher, was the Ramana Maharshi in South India, who at a young age just stopped doing anything. I guess he ate and slept. But he just went to one hill, one holy hill, and just lived there and really didn't do anything. Because the idea is that, well, if you self-realize, you just, what is there to do? There's no meaning in the world, so you just live out your life and finish. That's all. But a devotee he's on a better platform because he knows that pain is real. That if I were to be asked to justify my philosophical understanding, I would start with this: pain is real. That's where Buddha started. What is real? First of all, you have to understand what is reality. Okay, reality is Krishna. We don't see Krishna. Pain, we experience. Pain is real. And again, if you want to say, I am you and you are me and we are all together sitting on a cornflake, etc., then you can talk like that. That's nonsense. But pain is real. That's where Buddha started. Pain is real. So there is... Then the next question is, how do we get free from pain? You can imagine it doesn't exist. But it does. Reincarnation is a fact. That means there's suffering birth after birth. So where do we go from that? We could follow Buddha, but why should we? Because that knowledge is already there in the Vedic. Complete knowledge of that is already given in the Vedic and in the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita gives knowledge. The Bhagavad Gita recognizes the point that there is pain. The Bhagavad Gita recognizes that there is reincarnation. Reincarnation is a fact. You may say you don't believe in it, but even if you take by modern scientific inquiry, it is a fact. So Buddhism also spoke of reincarnation, but because he wanted to defy the Vedas, he denied the existence of the Atma. And then in Buddhism they have no good explanation of reincarnation, because who, what, why or where gets reincarnated. So the Vedic explanation is Krishna's explanation makes sense more than anything. So if you're going to start philosophy bottom up, that means if we don't accept the revealed scriptures, then we can start on that point. Pain is real. Don't deny reality. You can deny reality, but you can't avoid this reality. But there is a higher reality beyond that. Then why do we want to be happy? Why do we want to be free of pain? Why should we bother? You can say like that. Why should we bother trying to be free of pain? Actually, there is in the early life of Ramana Maharshi, some local boys persecuted him and beat him, and he just didn't respond. So I guess he was living his philosophy. He didn't try to run away or resist them in any way. He was living his philosophy. But that example you gave yesterday, that you may have a certain position, you're talking about milk, so okay, you believe that? There's no such thing as pain, so you come back in the next life and we'll arrange for you to be tortured. It's somewhat different context you spoke about that, yeah. Okay. Yeah, it looks like you're all set to ask a question. Is it? What's the conclusion? Chant Hare Krishna and be happy.
About this Buddhist, what you said, that we can kick them in face by boot. And
kick them in the face with the boot is a rhetorical reply. We're not actually going to do it.
No, of course. But in YouTube...
But the fact is that that material nature is kicking us all the time anyway. I gave the example of Ramana Maharshi getting beaten. Now you said about Buddhism, I just remembered one of the most famous photographs of the 20th century is that of a Vietnamese Buddhist monk burning himself in public to protest the Vietnam War, which was useless because the Vietnam War, the continuation or cessation of the Vietnam War had nothing to do with him burning himself. But anyway, he tolerated the pain, or maybe he didn't feel it. Yogis, they can overcome pain and not feel it at all. Now, was you going to ask about that in particular? If I can read your mind, you know what it's called? It's called Paramatma. Yeah, speak in the mic.
It was my question. He was completely peaceful in YouTube. We can watch him. He's burning, and in the last moment.
And another of the famous photos from there's another two famous photos I can remember from the Vietnam War. One is a young girl running from My Lai, this village which is being burned, and another one, actually it's two photos which go together, of a man being executed in Saigon. He's tied up, and you can see the look of the gun is held to his head. And then you can see him with this look of complete, how to describe it, of complete distress. And then you see the next one is with blood coming out of his head and him falling over. So those three photos I remember from my childhood of the Vietnam War.
Yeah, my question, it was then really they feel nothing. Like, because if in some...
Well, they can, they have some kind of realization, you can say, yeah. They can have their, they can become detached from this world. They practice that. They may practice with... that's another point. There's so many people calling themselves Buddhists, but to be a real Buddhist, as... Well, of course, people may say you don't know what you're talking about when I'm talking about Buddhism, and to a large extent I don't, but then that may be true of many others also who call themselves Buddhists. But Buddha didn't start a movement where you just sit at home and think yourself a Buddhist. His was a monastic movement. If you want to be a Buddhist, you had to be damn serious. And although he said the middle way, that means not heavy austerities, but considering that society at that time was not very sensuous anyway, his middle way is quite an austere way. And it was especially this Mahayana Buddhism that made Buddhism for everyone, which was, Mahayana Buddhism is, it was discovered centuries after Buddha. So, and then, yeah, it was never meant to be a religion, like you say. Now you say Buddhist country, Sri Lanka, Buddhist country, but it was never meant to be a set of rituals. It was a protest against that. But anyway. Yeah.
Maharaj, how to overcome secondary topics in...
how to overcome secondary topics?
Yes, in philosophy.
In philosophy.
Because
read
often...
Prabhupada's books. Get right to the essence. Bahunam janmanamante jnanavam mam prapadyate vasudeva sarvamiti samahatma sudurlabha. We may be fascinated by all these things, but realize we've been through all. If we're in this position, means we've been through all that already. We don't have to go back. Aho bata svapacho to goriyan yad jivagre vartate namatubhyam tepas tapas te juhavu sasnurarya brahmanucha namagrinanti yete. Even if born in very low situations, like all of us, by Vedic understanding, we're all in very low situation. If we have the fortune to chant the holy names of Krishna, that means we've already been through all those other things. Visiting pilgrimage sites, studying all the different Vedic philosophies, and charity and so on. For a In the Western world, we could bloop, right? We have that famous ISKCON word, bloop. We bloop to what? Rock music and drugs and sex, but you could have a Vedic bloop is to complex philosophy. You go back to that. Try and work it all out. It doesn't mean we shouldn't understand these things according to our capacity. But don't get hung up on it. Otherwise there's no end. There's no end to it. The end is when we surrender to Krishna. That's all. Is that a question of faith? Yes. But if we don't believe it, that means we have faith that what the Vaishnavas teach is not true. We have to have faith in something. We can't Shraddha Mayo Yang Purusha. Everyone in this world has some kind of faith. As Krishna points out in Bhagavad Gita. We can't avoid it. So it's where to put our faith. This idea that we can objectively understand everything by science, there's no, as different philosophers of science have pointed out, there's no real objectivity in science anyway. You can say to some extent, oh, I was saying 2 + 2, so so some objectivity, right? You bring 2 apples, another 2 apples, you have 4 apples. You react acid with alkali, you get salt and water. Okay. But once it gets more complex, then subjectivity comes into it. And even what's studied, that also cultural factors may come into that. Just like there are so many studies now on the physiognomy of males and females. That's influenced by the whole gender question. Otherwise, why should there be so much study of that? Why is it that there's been billions of dollars spent on cancer research and not on malaria research? Because malaria mostly occurs in poor countries where the pharmaceutical companies are not going to make a lot of profit from curing it. So science is also driven by subjectivity. Why is it that in the Western countries the medical orthodoxy rejects Ayurveda, homeopathy, natural medicine? They don't, well, the tendency is to reject it because then they're out of business, right? So science is not just pure, there's no such thing as pure subjectivity. Is that an objective statement? I got caught in making an absolute statement that there's no such thing as an absolute. Yeah. Pain is real. I've got a pressure in my bladder. It's real. One more question.
If the language in this material world has its limits.
Language in this world has limits.
And many,
well, can you qualify that statement?
What do you mean? Šta misliš pod time? She said, if we say that language in this world has limits.
Or maybe we should say, to be more, I think what she means to say, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the conceptualization which we do via the medium of language is limited.
Da, ovi koncepti koje imamo u jezicima su ograničeni. Da, i onda she says that through these languages some philosophical concepts are expressed. Through these limited languages.
Yeah, through limited languages philosophical concepts are expressed. Or we could just say concept.
Then considering this, what should we say about the language in the spiritual world?
Considering this, what should we say about the language in the spiritual world? That's very similar to the question which opens the prayers of the personified Vedas, the 90th chapter, I believe, of the 10th canto of Bhagavatam, in which Parikshit Maharaj asks Shukadev that if the how can words describe, we're in material consciousness, so how can the words describe the spiritual which is unlimited? And there's a whole chapter, by the most complex philosophy in the whole of the Bhagavatam, but boil it down to, it's all by the mercy of Krishna. Krishna's mercy is the factor. How can Brahman, which is spiritual, be understood? Through words. It's Krishna's mercy. That's all. It's the mercy factor. By our own brains, we're not going anywhere. Hare Krishna. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyascha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnava.